Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, Umber Rays, and today I want to talk about the power creep. But not just any power creep, I want to talk about the global power creep. That's right, I'm not very interested today in the Japanese power creep. I am interested in the global power creep. And yes, as you can see, I got a few guys here joining us, I should say. And basically they were here for the recording of the last video. Anyway, let's talk about the global power creep, because the global power creep is kind of interesting now. Actually, ever since 7 stars started coming along, I started watching the global side with more interest, because I was very curious to see how, the parent company of FFBE on the global side would really treat some of the old 7 stars and see what kind of global buffs they would get, because a global buff is always is just really interesting to me. It's the potential of an old character becoming really great again, or at least getting a little bit of extra life put into them by slightly improving their kit. That's a really interesting idea. I think that is a really great thing too. But with that being said, recently on the global side, I've actually kind of become a little bit concerned, and I'm starting to look at things with a bigger microscope, because really, I'm starting to notice a bit of a pattern, and the pattern started with Zargabaath. So what is my main concern about this, and is it even a concern that you, the player, should be worried about? Well, yes and no. First of all, really, the interesting thing about a power creep is that a well thought out power creep is actually perfectly fine. The way that you introduce characters and how much more powerful they are than the previous character, and how much time it takes for a more powerful character to show up, can be a crafted art, basically. If you do it properly, guess what? The game player feels that it's just kind of exciting when you see a new character that is very powerful. Now, there are some ways to do this. Switching between classes is a good way to increase the power level of some types of units while leaving other types of units at a specific power level. Take what happened on the JP side with Hayu, or Hayo, or it's off to work we go. What happened on the Japanese side was Hayu came out, and the power level kind of stayed at a very similar level for a while. Yes, there was Randy with fixed dice, but fixed dice was kind of a mistake, as Alan has kind of figured out ever since, and has, recently nerfed fixed dice with the new damage formula, but still, the power level was very much set for physical attackers for a long period of time on the JP side, meaning that there was a plateau where other character types could come out and flourish. More recently on the JP side, it has felt, kind of the same thing. Both Axstar and Satan came out, and they are the most powerful physical attackers in the game by far. And ever since then, well, there has been some, recent development in terms of chain finishers, but in terms of chainers, there really hasn't been someone that has kind of come along to take away that role. Same with magic attackers. When you look at it, Golbez came out, but Golbez was relatively about the same, if not a little bit weaker strength compared to some of the other mages that have recently come out, such as Altima or, more importantly, Ellie. Now, of course, Ellie is just a goddess, and if you don't think Ellie is a goddess, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. I'm sorry, you're wrong. Ellie is basically just the best mage on the JP side, and is still the best mage on the JP side. But the power creep does, go in bits and spikes a lot of the time, and with some interesting and diverse units in between to, break up the potential of wanting a different style of character when you get a little bit tired of the character you are using. But on the global side recently, if you look at characters such as Malphacy, if you looked at characters like Adam and Victor, I'm not 100% clear on why they are so strong yet. I'm sure somebody will comment about it. But if I am to understand it, they both can equip fixed dice, so it might be just a little bit of the Randy situation. Still, with characters like Barbie and potentially Malphasie, even though Malphasie has the disadvantage of being a hybrid unit, and if you're not sure what the disadvantage of being a hybrid unit is, it's quite simple. Basically, hybrid units are suffering or suffer from, physical and magical resistant or proof enemies, as their attacks count as both. But if you look at the power level currently on the global side, there have been actually some characters that come out that seemingly could potentially push Hayo, or It's Off to Work We Go, into, a little bit more of competition. And so this is kind of a question with characters like Lucius and Lilith, and still a whole bunch of 7 stars, including, the later units that need to get 7 stars, potentially being more powerful. Is the power creep going to accelerate because of global buffs? And the real example that I have found out of all of this is Zargabaath. Zargabaath is a character that was kind of shocking when I saw his 7-star kit, and honestly, at this point, I would be willing to call it a mistake. And what do I mean by that? Because it's not necessarily his buffing skills or his limit burst. They are definitely good. It is his elemental protection that felt very much above and beyond what the actual curve is right now. If you take a look at the 2 characters that were the biggest all elemental protection back then on the JP side, it was basically Ignis and CG Fina, both who could provide the entire team with elemental protection for multiple turns. Zargabaath has this, but actually better, actually considerably better. The next major buffer to come out on the global side, all things, being equal, should be Eurisha. Eurisha is definitely, powerful. Her limit burst does offer some extra things that, Zargabaath does not. It offers higher buffs. Higher buffs are more important as the enemies get stronger. Not only that, but Eurisha's kit also has, some other good things. It does have damage reduction. It does have a few, just some other stuff. But Zargabaath presents this potentially interesting problem now that Eurisha is essentially not as valuable or as interesting to pull. Again, if you take a look at some of the things that Zargabaath has that I think make him really valuable, 60% all elemental protection is incredibly valuable. Looking at JP right now, elemental protection is one of the most important things for doing a whole bunch of the most difficult trials on the JP side. So, yeah, what are you to do? You need elemental protection. Eurisha doesn't have full elemental protection. She has strong earth and wind elemental protection in the same way that CG Nickel has strong ice and water protection. But this is kind of a problem. Now what do we have to do to make Eurisha more appealable for people to potentially pull for her? Because if a gacha game can't keep people interested in pulling at least a little bit on every banner, then, the game has potentially some more financial problems, which does affect, development and everything like that. And how will that affect development? But this raises a question. If the units become more powerful, does the content in the future need to become more powerful? Obviously, with a character like Zargabaath now, maybe his buffs aren't necessarily the greatest, but with that elemental the greatest compared to some of the stuff that could potentially come in the future. Could. Potentially. Again, I'm looking into a crystal ball here and kind of basing this information on what we've seen on the JP side and giving an estimation of what we could see on the global side. But this is a big problem. How will content shift? Will the JP content, when it finally arrives on the global side, still be challenging, or will the power creep have accelerated faster than the JP side? Again, if we were to put it as kind of a graph, if the JP side is going along as so, if the global side is just slightly higher, and it constantly needs to outbuff itself, you could see more of an exponential rise. Basically, instead of seeing a general incline, you could see a general spike, just a general bigger and bigger spike. It's not necessarily that it could that it could happen, I should say. It's that the potential does exist here, and I find that very interesting. Again, the biggest thing here is how good the planning is on the global side by the parent company. And that is something that I don't exactly have the greatest confidence, and maybe a lot of global players will agree with me in not having the biggest confidence in the parent company. If you look at some of the decisions that they've made, and again, this could be calculated. Take a look at Adam and Victor, both who had, I believe, a healing ability that could heal Stop and Charm on them, yet neither of them had really any natural Stop or Charm resistance, and the ability also gave them Stop and Charm resistance anyway, so, any natural Stop and Charm resistance. It's kind of a weird ability that just doesn't really belong there and makes no sense, and kind of makes me wonder if anybody really thought it out, or if they just threw it in the game because they could, or what. But it is a big question mark about how reliable the parent company is going to be in managing the power creep going forward. And could units like Axstar and Satan, if they arrive, well, okay, more Satan is the if there. If Satan from Xenogears does show up on the global side, and eventually Axstar will show up, could they be out power-crept just as fast? Because the content from global does a lot come from JP with, to my knowledge, very little if no changes. One of the big things, of course, on the global side is that a lot of TMRs, or even super TMRs, don't stack. However, of course, global can TMR farm, which is something that JP side can't do, which is a little bit of a limiter. But given that some of the stats and builds that I have heard people doing with Zargabaath, I'm very, very curious whether or not the global side is just going to experience a much bigger power creep and will experience bigger problems in the future because the planning has been done for a lower power creep and a lower power level. But, of course, I really would like to know what your guys' thoughts are, if you think that I am totally off base, or if you think that, hey, maybe I'm on to something. Either way, I don't think it's worth a panic button yet, but it is something to keep your eye on. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. I have to go do a live stream now. See you next time.